Hi, Adam. We just spoke to Port and they mentioned that about a quarter of their squad weren't there due to COVID. I'm just wondering what numbers you had and how you've been impacted by it.
Yeah, look, we've got numerous players who've contracted COVID over the break. Certainly an unusual circumstance to get back after a Christmas period and have the number of players unavailable for training. But I guess that's what we're seeing is now a norm across the AFL. So our numbers are not dissimilar, and certainly not dissimilar to other clubs over on the Eastern Seaboard. But those players will come out of isolation over the course of this week, and COVID cases pending. By this stage next week, we almost have every other player back inside of the program.
So you're saying about a quarter weren't at training today?
Yeah, not a dissimilar number. Across our players and staff, there are a number missing. So the numbers are pretty similar across the industry from what we understand, talking to other clubs. Every club's confronting the same situation. So something as a community, I guess we're all getting used to. Many industries getting affected by it, and our code is just one of those.
Is anyone particularly unwell?
Now, pleasingly, actually, we had a number of our players that have either been asymptomatic or very minor symptoms. On a couple of occasions, we've had some players that have experienced a little bit more uncomfortability with the symptoms they've been presented with, but no hospitalisations and everyone doing quite well.
And those that are just close contacts that are obviously still healthy, are they training at home? Are they following the program? Are you getting any gear delivered to them?
Yeah, it's been, I guess, what we got used to over the last couple of years is these being isolated instances where you could sort of support players in isolation, but given the greater number, it's a little bit harder to do that, and especially when you've got players across multiple states. But the players are pretty well versed now on what they need to do when they are in circumstances such as isolation to keep themselves going, and they're doing that. So no doubt they're all looking forward to getting out there.
And is it mainly the players that did go back to the East to see their families?
No, it's a bit of a combination, really. I guess COVID's now quite prevalent in our community. So, there's a number of players who are based here in South Australia and in other states as well.
Thank you.
Anna at AAP.
Yeah, hi, Adam. Just looking, I guess, further forward as well, with Dyson Heppel from Essendon talking about this morning here in Melbourne. In terms of managing COVID as you head towards the season, how much of an impact do you think it's going to have on team success? Is it who can, just even looking overseas, who can sort of manage the health and availability that's going to be crucial coming into the season?
Yeah, I think whether you're talking about COVID or injuries, player availability is critical to team performances. And certainly if a club can manage it well and have their players more available than others, it might give them some sort of advantage. But I guess within each club and their own programs, they'll take their own steps to mitigate against the risk. And I know inside of our clubs, we now have got full separation between our programs, our AFL men's and AFLW and our SANFL program, so there's no crossover of personnel. And as all other AFL clubs are doing, we've got the rapid antigen tests happening on a daily basis, mask wearing inside, etc. So there are a number of measures that are in place now that weren't in place pre-Christmas to mitigate against that risk. And more broadly, I guess we've asked our players and staff to take a common sense approach to managing risk and trying to avoid those situations that might put them at greater risk of exposure.
And I know obviously there's the vaccine mandate, but do you try and get your players and staff into their boosters as soon as they're eligible? Is that part of your thinking? Yeah,
it's certainly encouraging that, and already talking to staff and players today, they're talking about when they're able to get those boosters. So they'll be looking forward to doing that, and we encourage not only our people but people in the community to book up for your booster as soon as you possibly can.
Right, thank you.
Simeon at the Tizer.
Hey, Kells. I guess one thing that was kind of interesting that your counterpart at Port Adelaide kind of said was that it could be maybe 15 days until, I guess, to reintegrate a player who has come down with COVID or has tested positive to COVID back into maybe full training or even, into training. Do you see that being, are you going to take maybe a similar time frame with COVID, with positive cases?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a case by case, Simeon. I think that some players that have been either asymptomatic or had very minor symptoms have been able to do a strong body of work at home, might integrate back into the main group quite quickly, whereas others who might have suffered some symptoms and have had to be off legs for a period of time, they might take a little bit longer. So yeah, case by case would be the best way I describe that.
And I guess, regardless of case by case, will you look to do testing for when people rejoin the program after testing positive?
At this stage, I guess it's just on the way that the players are presenting as to whether they've rejoined the program immediately or not, or whether we need to do a modification. So, yeah, as I said, on a very individual basis, I'll meet with our medical team. We've been through that today, where we've had players meeting with our club doctors before rejoining main training, and players have been able to do that.
Yep. How, I guess, challenging is South Australia's different rules in terms of isolation, but also close contact definition going to be, I guess, given that the eastern states, all the teams on the east are going to be operating under different set of rules?
Yeah, I guess, right throughout the pandemic, governments have responded in different ways, and we fully respect the work that's happened here at South Australia. So it's not for us to question whether 10 days of isolation is warranted or otherwise. We just follow the health advice. It's an inconvenience that any of our players or staff who are in isolation do a few extra days, but we're not going to question the direction we get from the government in that regard, and they've done an outstanding job throughout the pandemic.
I guess it's a 15-minute, close contact kind of definition. Is that more of a concern maybe that, it does, and then they can be ruled out, have to isolate for 7 days?
Yeah, I think it certainly steers the response that we have as a club. That's why the wearing a mask, for example, whilst we're inside of the club facilities becomes really important, because you don't want to have players and staff members deemed to be close contact. So you do whatever you can, not only to ensure that they don't go into isolation as close contact, but for their own health and safety and to stop the transmission of the disease.
Yeah. Is there, I guess, I think I saw maybe, it was unnamed, I guess, club boss in Melbourne was kind of saying it might be, I don't think there's ever a perfect time for players to get COVID, but I guess at the start of pre-season, maybe maybe a better time, because, you don't impact games and everything. Is that I guess, something you almost think about to an extent, or?
Yeah, look, you don't encourage anyone to try and contract the disease, but I guess when you're talking about this period in the year when we're not playing games, they're not missing games. So, from that point of view, it's probably more convenient to have contracted the disease now and have your immunity levels raised over the coming months and be at less risk of contracting it again. But, you don't do that by design.
Yeah. And how do you see this, I guess, impacting, I guess, the SANFL? How is it going to be a challenge, managing the SANFL program, given that, your AFL, some of your AFL listed players will have to play with these players? I guess, and, you may have a lot of players ruled out for that. You might have to get a bigger pool of players, maybe. How do you see that kind of working?
Yeah, it's a good question, and something that we're starting to grapple with. There's no doubt there'll be times in the year, whether it be an AFL listed player or SANFL listed players, that could be unavailable. You just got to hope that you're able to manage it in such a way as that they're not big in number. But we do need to develop some strategies to have in place so that we can top up that SANFL team if we do run a little bit short on numbers. So those conversations are sort of happening at the moment as we look to work our way through that.
Do you speak with a SANFL about, I guess, maybe broadening the pool of players that you do have available as top-ups?
Yeah, it's something we'd like to do. You don't want to have an unnecessarily big list to accommodate COVID risks. So we're probably looking at circumstances where you might be calling on a development or top-up player at short notice. So if there are ways in which we could work with the SANFL to have those players identified and readily available if the need arises, that's certainly something we'd like to entertain.
Finally, have you got any clarification, I guess, on the status of the trip to Perth in pre-season? I know WA is supposed to open the borders in February, but I guess it's hard to tell sometimes over there.
Yeah, look, that's what we're planning for. We're planning to play West Coast on that sort of weekend of Feb 25, 26. we had similar plans last year that didn't eventuate, and we ended up playing Port Adelaide on 2 occasions. So that's obviously a preference of ours at the moment. It's what we're planning towards, and hopefully that's what the outcome will be.
Cool. Thanks, Kels.
Thanks.
Max at 10, you got any questions?
Most have been asked and answered. Thanks, Kels. But is there anything in particular that you have advised your players or even mandated your players not to do away from the club to stop them getting COVID?
Yeah, nothing we've mandated. The AFL protocols at the moment don't speak to living restrictions. So they do in the AFLW, given that they're in season. But when it comes to the AFL men's program, there's nothing mandated. We've just asked players to cast the lens of conservatism, I guess, when they're making choices about how they're going to interact. So that's all we've asked of them at the moment. And now that we're back training, I think that we'll see that our players will take a more conservative approach.
The other one I wanted to ask was on training this morning. Rory Sloane off doing his own thing over on the other side of the oval. Is there anything there to be concerned about?
Yeah, not to be concerned about. He's got a minor hamstring strain that kept him out of the main group training today. But we'd expect, all things going well, that he should be back with the main group by the end of the week.
Thanks, mate.
Jack at the Inner Sanctum.
Hi, Adam. Just a couple of questions from me. Firstly, a more footy question. Having gone through somewhat of a rebuild in recent seasons, what's the current feeling at the club over the current playing list? Do you think you've got a good balance between youth and experience now? And generally, what's the expectations for performance over the season? Is it too early to talk about finals?
Got that one off nice and early, Jack. Yeah, look, when it comes to our playing list, what we've seen in 2021 is we got a group of senior players who really stood up. And when we sat down at the end of the year and we went through the review processes, we identified that many of our senior players had sort of best ever seasons or equal to best ever seasons. And that's all you can ask from that senior cohort. And then when it comes to our younger group, there's a growing experience in that group. So we'll go into season 2022 as the youngest list in the competition once again, but we've got a number of players now that sit in that sort of 25 to 50 game bracket. Jordan Butts and Chase Jones, Will Hamill, Andrew McPherson, Harry Schomburg, Lockie Scholl, Ned McHenry, Darcy Fogarty, sort of all sitting in that bracket. And come season's end, if those guys are regulars in the team, they're all going to be approaching or in excess of 50 games. So what we're seeing, whilst it's a young group, they're building experience. And that's, they're getting the most out of their footy careers. So they're working hard. They're really positive group. They're really connected and they're determined for success. So we're really confident in the group we've put together and looking forward to what they can deliver.
And just a second question. Just wondering about the status of Taylor Walker. Has he been around the club recently?
Yeah, Taylor hasn't missed a session. And he's trained extremely well. He's now two pre-seasons running that Taylor's presented himself really well, and we've seen how well he played last year. So, we'd expect him to have another strong season, and he hasn't missed a session today.
Has he been received well by the squad?
Yeah, absolutely. The full squad are engaged, and Taylor's an important part of that, and the squad's welcome you back with open arms.
Thank you very much, Adam.
Does anyone else have any final questions before we wrap it up?
I just want to ask about Milra. I assume he was out there today. How's he tracking after a couple of years on the sidelines?
Yeah, it's been great to have him back within the main group. As you'd imagine, 2 years away from the game effectively presents some significant challenges, and Wayne's much loved, respected member of our group, obviously highly talented, and we're just so pleased that he's out there with the main group at the moment and going well. Puts a smile on our face seeing him out there, to be honest. And fingers crossed that it all goes well for him throughout season 2022, because our fans and supporters love nothing more than seeing Wayne out there on the park.
So will you plan to play him in a trial game and round one?
Yeah, well, he's progressing that way. We say it cautiously because he's had such a long layoff from football. So, we cross our fingers every day and hope that he gets through every session and he's another step closer to making his way back onto the field. But everything's going accordingly and going well.
And any other off-season surgeries?
No, we had the pre-Christmas surgery for Lockie Murphy, who had that surgery on a bulging disc in his neck. His rehabilitation is going really well. And that was the only sort of surgery that happened in December, January.
Thank you.
Kels, what kind of, I guess, lessons have you maybe taken out of the AFLW program so far, and how they've kind of been dealing with the COVID situation? And what's the update, I guess, with them?
Yeah, look, they've implemented since they returned to training back on December 27, I believe it was. They've implemented the same sort of protocols we've now got in place. So, the mask wearing inside, the rapid antigen tests on a daily basis, and to the large part, they've been able to manage through without having COVID impact on their program. So they've done a really good job there. And what a pleasing way to start season 2022 it was yesterday. I think everyone walked in with a bit of pep in their step after watching the women yesterday against the Lions. Look, we do learn a bit. And importantly, and this is for the health and safety of their program and for ours, we're fully separated now, which has its downside. You don't get to interact as much with colleagues that were working in the AFLW program and nor mingle with the players. And hopefully at a point in time during the season that might change. But we're certainly very respectful of each other's programs and making sure that one doesn't impact on the other inadvertently.
So what do you do with coaching in pre-season? Does Rob and Strawny just have to coach themselves?
No, we've actually allowed, whilst the vast majority of our staff aren't working across more than one program, we do have some exceptions to that. So there's a couple of staff members who can work across the two, but where and if we can, we had complete separation. So Doc will still work with Strawny and Rob.